All right.
So, last week and even before Christmas break, what we did is we spent time finding out what a parallelogram was. And then before Christmas break, we talked about what a rectangle was, and a rectangle had all of the properties of a parallelogram. So everything that was true about a parallelogram was true about a rectangle. Then last week we talked about rhombi and squares. And a rhombus again is a parallelogram. So a rhombus has all the properties of a parallelogram. And then a square has all of the properties of all three of these. So it has the properties of a parallelogram, a rectangle, and a rhombus, okay? All of these are related because the bottom three are parallelograms. Now, when we go to the opposite side, today we're gonna talk about trapezoids and isosceles trapezoids. These are not parallelograms. And then tomorrow we're gonna talk about kites. Those are also not parallelograms, okay? So, when we look here, today we're gonna talk about trapezoids, tomorrow we're gonna talk about kites. And then I just wanna point out too, that then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're gonna do the first 3 days of chapter 7. And then I'm gonna give you a quiz on the 2 days last week plus these 5 days. That will be your quiz. It'll be Monday a practice quiz next week and then Tuesday quiz. All right, so first of all, we have to talk about how is a trapezoid different than a parallelogram. So last week we talked about parallelograms, and a parallelogram had both pairs of opposite sides parallel, okay? That was a parallelogram. Both pairs of opposite sides parallel, and a rectangle, and a rhombus, and a square all had that true. Today what we're gonna talk about is a trapezoid. And in a trapezoid, only one pair of opposite sides are parallel. So that's what makes a parallelogram and a trapezoid different, okay? Now, in a trapezoid, I'm gonna go right here. Actually, I'll just draw one, I guess. So if I draw a trapezoid, okay, it has opposite sides parallel. Then the two sides that are parallel are called bases. So this would be a base as well as this would be a base. And then these two sides that are not parallel are called legs. Okay? And then another thing that's true in a trapezoid is this angle and this angle together, the two that lie along the parallel side, are a pair of base angles. And then same thing on these top two. This one and this one would be a pair of base angles. Okay, so again, in a trapezoid, opposite sides, just one pair are parallel. They're your bases. The two sides that are not are called your legs. These two angles are a pair of base angles as well as those two are. Okay, so down here, the next thing we're going to talk about is an isosceles trapezoid. So a trapezoid in itself has the opposite sides parallel. Okay, that's what makes it a trapezoid. What makes something isosceles is that your legs are parallel, or I'm sorry, congruent. Okay, so these two are parallel, these two are congruent. If that's the case, it's isosceles. And then another thing that we know in an isosceles trapezoid is that these two base angles are congruent and these two base angles are congruent. So on your cheat sheet for the isosceles trapezoid, okay, can you guys, so the second one down, not the first one, can you mark that these two are congruent and these two are congruent on the cheat sheet? And then the other thing that's true if you have an isosceles trapezoid is that the diagonals are congruent. So if you want to just draw that off to the side. Okay. So let's go to our next page here. So here it says if your trapezoid is isosceles, then these two base angles would be congruent as well as these two would be congruent. Okay? That's an isosceles trapezoid. This one is, we're not going to really talk about, but this one is saying if you have an isosceles trapezoid, which would mean that these two sides are congruent, your two legs are congruent, what happens then is your diagonals are congruent. Okay, so that's another thing that's true, is that your diagonals are congruent. So this is one type of question that you're going to have, where they just ask you what angle measure something is. Now, these are your parallel sides, and notice in this one, these two sides are congruent. Those are your legs. So that means it's isosceles. If it's isosceles, we know that this angle and this angle are equal, okay? So we know that this is 63. Now, another thing that we have to kind of remember back to chapter 2, so this was a while ago. Do you guys remember learning about alternate interior, alternate exterior, consecutive interior, and corresponding? Can you guys tell what these two angles would be if these are parallel and this is your transversal? Consecutive interior. And what do we know about consecutive interior? They're supplementary. Very good. So do you guys get that angle S would actually be 180 minus 63, which is 117. And that is what they're asking us here. If they asked us by chance for angle T, do you guys know what that would be? 117 also, yes. Okay. Now let's look at this one. Again, in this one, it is isosceles, okay, because the legs are both 5. And this is just asking for that angle. What would that be? 140. Because these two, again, are consecutive interiors, so they add up to 180. So we would just go 180 minus 40, which is 140. Okay. Now, if we look at this page, it says we have each side of a basket is an isosceles trapezoid. So that means these two are equal. It says if the measure of angle JML, that's this whole angle here, is 130, and KN, which is this distance, and I can tell you guys in this one, the two lengths in this one don't matter. So I'm not even going to label that on the diagram. It doesn't have anything to do with the problem, so I'm going to skip that. And then it says, what is the measure of angle MJK right here? Do we know what that is? 50, right? Because these two are parallel, so those two are consecutive interior, and they add up to 180. So when we go to do this, our answer would just be 180 minus 130, which is 50. And of course, you don't have to show the work for that part. Now in B, this one they are asking us for a length. So in this one, the angle doesn't matter. So you wouldn't have to worry about that. This is an isosceles trapezoid. So that means these two are parallel and these two are congruent. And they tell us here that KN right here is 6.7, and that's the length of this section of the diagonal. And that JL, which is this whole thing, the whole thing here is 10.3. And what they're asking us for is MN right here. Okay? So in an isosceles trapezoid, diagonals are congruent. So what that means there, if the whole green one is 10.3, then this has to be 10.3. So do you guys get that I would just go 10.3 minus 6.7, which would be 3.6. Okay? All right. So now, let's go here. So this again, we have an isosceles trapezoid. So these would be our parallel sides. These would be our congruent sides. And then they tell us that this one we're trying to find a length again. So that means the angle we don't have to worry about. So FI is this distance right here is 9.8. And EG, which is the whole thing here, is 14.1. Find IH right there. Is that one just like the last one? Right? Wouldn't we just subtract? So we would just go 14.1 minus 9.8, which is 4.3. And then here's our answer. Okay. All right. So now if we look at this one, this is talking about cafeteria trays. It says to save space at a square table, cafeteria trays often incorporate trapezoids into their design. If WXYZ is an isosceles trapezoid, and the measure of angle YZW right here is 45, and WV, which is this length right here, is 15, and VY right here is 10, find the rest of the measures. So the first one is asking us for XWZ. XWZ is this angle right here. And notice this is an isosceles trapezoid. These are my parallel sides, and then these would be my congruent legs. If it's isosceles, what do we know about those two base angles? They're the same, right? So if this is 45, that makes this 45. Okay? So that's that first answer. Then if we go to our next one, they ask us for WXY. That's up here. Okay? If these are parallel, what should these be? Supplementary, right? They should add up to 180. So if that's 45, that one's going to be 180 minus 45, which is 135. So that goes right here. Okay. Then they ask us to find xz. Xz is this whole thing. Okay? Now, one thing I know kids kind of get confused about is, are these angles or are they parts of a side? This 10 is part of the diagonal, that 15 is part of the diagonal. So that entire diagonal is actually going to be 15 plus 10, which is 25. So wouldn't this diagonal also be 25 because the diagonals are congruent? So this would be 25. Okay. And then this last one is asking us for xv. So I want to go back to your cheat sheet for 1 second. Okay, so go back to this right here. Okay, and let's draw diagonals here on your actual cheat sheet that you can use for the test. Okay, and what you know about these diagonals is not only are the whole diagonals congruent, but the other thing you know about them is these two pieces are going to be equal, as well as these two pieces are going to be equal. So that is what we're going to use to solve this problem. Because what they're asking us for, and this is kind of getting cluttered here, but they're asking us for xv right here, okay? If this is 10, this is going to be 10. If that's 15, this is going to be 15. So our answer for xv is just 10. Now here they say we have a isosceles trapezoid again, so remember these two would be parallel, these legs would be congruent. It says angle FGH right here is 85, FL is 8, and JG is this whole thing, which is 19, and then find each measure, okay? So what I'm gonna do first is look for angle FGH right here. Anyone know? We can't directly find it, we'd have to do 2 steps. Anyone see what you'd have to do? Do we know what this angle right here would be? This would be 85, right? Because these are base angles, these are equal. Then what would you know about these 2 angles? They would add up to 180. So to find that angle, I would just go 180 minus 85, which is 95. That is this angle right here. Okay, that is 95. Then they're asking us for LH. Okay, so here's the deal. They're asking us for LH right here. So this would be my X in this one. Notice this whole diagonal is 19, and one piece of this is 8. So to find the other piece, you'd go 19 minus 8. Everybody understand that? Okay, so if this whole thing is 19, then 8 plus 11 would give us that length. Okay, and then let's see what else does it ask us for anything else? No. All right, so now let's go here. So there's one last thing that we have to learn about a trapezoid. And one of the things that you guys are going to be doing, I think I told you that like term 5, which would start in March. We spend like almost 6 weeks preparing for your MCA test. And this could very likely be something that could be on there, but I can promise you it would be on your 11th grade MCA test. And that's one drawback of you guys having geometry in 8th grade, is geometry is 1/4 of the test that you take in 11th grade. So we can try to review things at the high school, but there are gonna be things that you learn in 8th grade that are gonna be on your 11th grade test. And this is one thing I would say for sure would be on there. So in a trapezoid, if you connected the midpoint of this side and the midpoint of that side and connected that, first of all, this would also be parallel to your bases, and it's called the mid-segment, or some books call it a median. I think it's more common to call it a mid-segment like ours does. And there's some things that is true about this, and here is the formula right here. If you go 1/2 times whatever this length is plus this length added together, you would get the length of that. It's kind of like finding the average between the two bases, okay? I stick with the 1/2 in this one, but when you do this on your calculator, or if you don't do it in your head, you can certainly use the 0.5 times, and then 5 plus 20 is 25, and 1/2 of 25 is 12.5. You'll see when I do 2 problems with you later why I stick with the 1/2 versus going 5 plus 20 divided by 2. That would be the same thing. But I do the 1/2 because of a certain type of problems later. If you did it this way, you'd either have to hit enter here before you divide by 2, or you'd have to put these in parentheses if you were just punching it into your calculator. Otherwise, you'd get every one wrong, so make sure you know that. All right, so this says HJ is 32, and LK down here is 60, and we want to find this. So again, it's just 1/2 times 32 plus 60, so it's 1/2 of 92. What's 1/2 of 92? Can you do that in your head? 46? Yep. All right. Then if we look at our next one, they tell us HJ is 25 and LK is 50, and we're looking for MN. This would be another thing you don't have to show your work on, but this would be 1/2 of 25 plus 50, which is 1/2 of 75, which is 37.5. Okay. So those are pretty easy. You just add the top and bottom together and multiply by 1/2. Now there's a second type of question that they're going to give you with these, where in these top 2, notice I was given the 2 bases, and I had to add them together and multiply by 1/2. On these bottom ones, you're going to be given one of the bases and the mid-segment, and you have to find the other one. Sometimes you're given the bottom one and the mid-segment, and you have to find the top. Sometimes you're given the top and the mid-segment, and you have to find the bottom. Now, this is how I show this. You can do an algebra equation too, but I start at the base I'm given, and I ask myself, what do you add to 18 or subtract from 18 to get 28? And don't we add 10? So whatever you do here, you add to the 28, and 28 plus 10 is 38. And that would be your answer. Okay, So if we look at this next one, we're gonna start at the bottom. You always start on the base, and you think, what do you add to 19 or subtract from 19 to get to 12? Well, we're going down, so we have to subtract, and 19 minus 7 is 12. So then I'm gonna subtract 7 again. 12 minus 7 is 5. Okay, so that would be my answer. Then if I look at C, again I start at the base. So I look at 86, I have to subtract to get to 72. What do I have to subtract there? 14. And then I would subtract 14 again. 72 minus 14, do you guys know what that is? 58. Okay. And then if we look at this bottom one, again, you start at the base. So you look at 66 to 42, again, we're going down, so we're subtracting, and we're subtracting 24. So I have to subtract 24 again, and this is 18. Okay. All right. So now let's look here. And in this one, they kind of combine the two ways just to make sure you know how to do the different types. So here they tell you this is 14 and LK is 42, and you want to find that. That's the first way we learned, and how we did that is we took 1/2 times 14 plus 42, which is half of 56, which is 28. So when they give you the two bases, that's like taking the average of the top and the bottom. Okay. If I look at B, in this one, they're giving me that LK down here is 19, TS is 15, and I want to find the other base. When they give you the middle and you have to find a base, that's when you do the shortcut way. So I have to go from 19 to 15, and to do that I subtract 4, and then I subtract 4 again. 15 minus 4 is 11. Okay. Then if I look at this one, HJ is 7, TS is 10, find LK, do you know what that would be? Here, that's the shortcut way again, and 7 plus 3 is 10. So 10 plus 3 is 13. Then if I go down to D, KL is 17, JH is 9. We're finding the middle, and that's when we do the 1/2 times. So it's half of 9 plus 17, which is half of 26, which is 13. Okay. And then our last one for today, this is just a regular trapezoid. So what that means is these two are parallel, okay? And they're telling us that angle F is 140, and they are telling us that angle E is 125, and they want angle D. Do you guys remember how to do that one? If these are parallel, what do I know about those two angles? They're supplementary, they add up to 180. So to find D, I would just go 180 minus 125, which is 55. Okay. All right, so your assignment then is this, and then I'm gonna do 2 problems with you guys. So I'm gonna give you a second to copy that, And then I will do the two problems with you. So I am going to start a new page here for this. And we're gonna do 43 and 44 because I did not do any like this. They're harder. So number 43 gives you a trapezoid. Then if you read number 43, it says PM is 2x. So that's this right here is 2x. And QR is 3x. So this is 3x. And then it says TS is 10. And what they want us to do is find PM. Okay, now to do this, you have to use algebra. It's really not a way you can do it other than that. And one of the things we talked about today is the mid segment, which is 2x, equals 1/2 times this plus this. The mid segment equals 1/2 times this plus this. And remember, if we're doing this in class, you still have to show the work along with me. Okay? So, the reason I stuck with that 1/2 is from now and like even future class or future parts of this class, when we have a half in front of parentheses like that, I don't distribute it. I would rather multiply both sides of my equation by 2, because what happens then, 2 times a half of 2 is 1. So if I multiply both sides of the equation by 2, that just clears out that fraction. So now on the right hand side, 2 times 2x is 4x, or the left hand side, sorry. And then on the right side, I have 3x plus 10. And then I can just go ahead and solve that with algebra. Solve 3x, or subtract 3x, and I get that x is 10. Now that's one answer, but then they want us to find PM, okay? PM is 2 times x, okay? So what we would do then is take this 10 and put it in for x. So PM would equal 20. So like I said, when they give you the 3 different, like the 2 bases and the mid segment, you have to set it up as an algebra equation. Now we're gonna do 44 also. So this one's the same diagram. And okay, and in this one, they ask us to find TS at the end. But it tells us in this one that TS, which is the bottom, is 2x plus 2. And then they say that QR is 5x plus 3. And PM is 13. Okay? So again, with this one, you have to set up an algebra equation. And it's always that mid-segment, 13, is equal to 1/2 times this plus this. So 5x plus 3 plus 2x plus 2. Okay? Now, what we're going to do to get rid of that half is multiply by 2. And we'd get 26 equals, this cancels, and now I can combine like terms. 5x plus 2x is 7x, 3 plus 2 is 5. Then I'm going to subtract 5, and I get 7x equals 21, divide by 7, and x is 3. Okay. Now, what they asked us for is TS, which is 2x plus 2. And what we can do is put that 3 in there, and we'd go 2 times 3 plus 2, which would be 6 plus 2, which is 8.